Welcome friends to this session of validation application blocks. What we will do is that in this session we will try to understand what are validation application blocks and how it can uh, help us to define dynamic validations in our project. So what we'll do is, first we will try to just walk through how normally validations are done, and then we will see that how enterprise validation application blocks helps us to create validations easily, dynamically, and which will increase our project productivity. So here's a sample project which I have. Basically, in this sample project, what I've done is that I created a small customer class. This is my new in a new project, and this customer class has a property called as a customer code. And what I've done is, I have a simple validation which I put here. That is, if suppose the customer code is null or is empty, I'm just throwing an exception out saying that the customer code is required. So what we do is normally the way of implementing validations are we use a set and a get, and in the set put we put all of business validations, and if there are any issues we just throw an exception out, and if there are no issues, you set the value to the private property of the class. So over here, like my private property is str customer code. So if any issues are happening over here, like if the value is null, or if it is, we need to ensure that it's a 5-character code, whatever it is, and we put all your validations before setting the value, and throw the exception if it meets the condition. If not, then you go and set the value. So this is a normal way we do it. And then what I've done is I have consumed this class in my UI. So in the same project, what I've done is that I have added my default.aspx page, and in the aspx page I have a validate customer button, which basically helps me to create the customer object, set the property, and in case there are issues, I just catch the exception. So if suppose in the set of the property, if there are issues, like example, if the length is 0, it just throws the exception out. It comes here, and then I display the exception. So what I'll do is that I'll just run this, and I'll just show you that how it works. What I'll do is I'll not put any I'll put the customer code as empty. I'll not type anything in the customer code text box, and I'll just say validate customer. So you will see that it has shown me that the customer code is required. And if I put some value, it will just show me that yes, there are no errors in the customer class. Good and nice. This works very well, and normally all the projects do the validation using this kind of methodology. But there are issues with this. With this validation, in the sense, if I say, okay, like let me say that if I want to now put one more validation here saying if the value is greater than 5, then show the error set saying that the customer code cannot be greater than 5. The biggest issue with this kind of validation style is that, if there are new validations, you need to add one more if condition here, or you need to add the extra logic for it. So this is where enterprise application blocks or enterprise validation application blocks will help us to define validations. I mean to say, you can add validations to the class, you can remove validations just by using simple config file. Because in enterprise validation application blocks, the validations lies in the web.config. So what I'll do is that let me pull out my enterprise library configuration UI, and let's open the config file. This project is currently, let me just get the project my custom validation. Okay, great. So let's go there, my custom validation. Let's open it. Let's take the config file. And what we'll do is that, and yes, at the other end, what I'll do is that I'll just remove this validation because I'm going to use enterprise application blocks, so I don't need this validation anymore here. Okay, so that's what has popped up by opening the config file. What I'll do is I'll just add a new validation application block. All right. So you can see that once you add a new validation application block, it just pops up a tree node. Now you need to add the type. Now the type is nothing but the class on which you need to do the validation. So over here, if you see, my class is basically the customer library namespace, which has the CLS customer class. So what I'll do is I'll just browse. We need to load the assembly. So that's my custom validation. Let me load the assembly. So let's take the DLL, customer library.dll. Right. It will take some time to load the assembly because it uses reflection to take up the properties and properties to read the properties and show the classes. Okay. So that's where I am. So you will see that our customer class over here. I'll just add it here. Now the customer class has been added here, right? So let's add a rule set. Rule set is nothing but it has collection of rules condition. So let me name this rule set as customer rule. Right. And let's choose the property on which we need to do the validation. I'm sorry, not the property. Let me remove this. Let's choose the members. When I say members, we need to apply the validation on the customer code property. So I've selected the customer code, say OK. And now what we'll do is that we'll apply a string length validator here because that's what we were trying to do. So the lower bound was that it should not be empty. So that means that it should be minimum 1, right? And inclusive. And the upper character can be anything, I'll at this moment I'll just put 100, right? And what is the error message? Customer code cannot be empty, right? So that's my error message and save it. All right, and what I'll do is that we also need to set what is the default rule default rule the class should use. So what I'll use the customer rule as a default. Great. Now if I go back and if I see my config file, because the UI was basically operating more on my config file. This UI was basically operating more on my config file. Now if I go and see my UI, you see my web config file. You will see that it has added the necessary XML tags, which will help the enterprise application block figure out that what are the validations that needs to be added. So you can see that over here he has put a property called as customer code. He has created the same rule set, the rule set tag, the property tag, upper bound, lower bound, so it has done all the necessary things here. So let me build the solution. This looks fine, right? Till here all nice and all good. Now what we will do is that we need to make some code changes in order to incorporate this. So what I'll do is that the first thing, we need to add a reference to our Microsoft validation application block. So let me take up enterprise validation application block. Great. And also let me add in my class, because